As you cower in the bottom of the closet, trying with all your might to hold back your shivering and your labored breaths, you hear the cabin door slam open. Slow, heavy footfalls begin moving through the room. You can hear the blunt metal face of the killer's sledgehammer drag along the wooden floorboards. The steps grow closer and closer until they come to a pause right in front of your hiding place. Make a pull from the tower. Hello and welcome to Downtime Activities. My name is Matthew and today I will be going over the horror suspense RPG game system Dread. With Halloween right around the corner, I can't think of a better time to go over this system. It's perfect for that spooky season, so let's get right into it. Dread is a tabletop RPG that uses a rather unorthodox method of determining success and failure to systematically build suspense and play, culminating in big, often tragic moments where everything comes crashing down. Quite literally. No dice needed here, only a Jenga tower. Essentially, for each action or moment of peril, the Game Master may have players pull one or more blocks from the tower, determined by the level of difficulty, and if they do so without the tower toppling over, they succeed. If they are unsuccessful and the tower falls, it spells the end for their characters. This means they die if the moment and story allow, or they essentially become dead men walking, robots for lack of a better word, who simply go through the motions of the story without making any new pulls until the story allows for them to be removed. Players can also intentionally knock the tower over, sacrificing themselves to reset the tower, and this is expressed in the story as the character dramatically sacrificing themselves to save the other players. A brief note here, these moments are amazing and memorable, but should not be overused. An unlikely sacrifice from an otherwise selfish character to save everyone from the clutches of a terrifying monster is a powerful moment that resonates with everyone. But if the game starts devolving into everyone jumping on the sword to be a hero one after another, that sacrifice loses its importance. This system perfectly lends itself to the horror genre, with the building suspense of an ever more unstable tower building in tangent with the suspense of the story being played out. When the timing of things hits just right, your players will be reaching for blocks on a wobbly tower with shaky hands right as their characters are in key moments of great peril. I will say that for most any other genre, this system's simplicity would make for rather uninspired gameplay, but here in the horror genre, it nails the feel that you want. This simplicity is also very helpful when introducing players that are less familiar with more traditional RPGs. Whether you have friends who are just getting into tabletop gaming, or if you're simply holding a Halloween get-together and want a game that everyone can jump in and enjoy, Dread is a perfect system for newcomers. Characters are created with a brief, albeit often probing and uncomfortable questionnaire, and then gameplay is simple, and rules light, with a focus on roleplay and decision-making. Speaking of that questionnaire, let's talk about character creation. Characters are made by going through a predetermined questionnaire that is specifically tailored to make each character fit a specific role in a horror story, while allowing enough choice and flexibility to make that player feel like the character is their own. For instance, if the story being told is that of the classic slasher flick, with teens running from some masked killer, one player may be the jock. The questionnaire would ask them things that mold their character to fit some of the tropes of that kind of a character, but their responses would still decide the specifics of that character and mold them into someone unique. These questionnaires come along with pre-built stories in the Dread game rules themselves, or can be found with pre-built games made by others online. If the game master is writing their own story, they will need to come up with questionnaires of their own. This is a somewhat tricky process that I will not be covering here, but keep an eye out for a future video where I break down making your own Dread story and questionnaires in the future. The questions inside these questionnaires are often very probing and are designed to make the answerer a little uncomfortable. They seek to put the players in the mindsets of the people they are playing and shape the decisions they will make in play. While some questions may be as simple as, "What is your name?" or "What grade of high school are you in?" Many of the questions are things like, "Why do you always try to isolate yourself when you are scared?" or "What does the voice in your head tell you to do that makes you the most uncomfortable?" In one game that I ran, I made a player the pet dog of a family living in a haunted house, and the opening question to their questionnaire was, "Who's a good boy?" The questions can vary wildly, but the result should always be the same. Help that player learn who they are playing, help them make decisions as that character, and set the character up to do things that will help drive the narrative of the story being told. With character creation complete, and an understanding of how the game is played, the last thing to cover is running the story itself. This will vary greatly depending on the kind of story being told, and the horror genre that you are looking to encapsulate within it. A survival horror game with a monster stalking players through dark woods will play differently than a sci-fi horror game with players hiding from horrific aliens in deep recesses of a spaceship, adrift with no power. The one consistent piece that is key to successfully running a Dread game, regardless of genre, is building and maintaining suspense. This will take some practice, especially for newer tabletop game masters, and will come easier to some than others. Having a slow building tension that spikes at those key moments is not easy, and often that release of tension can happen earlier than the story wants. When suspense like that is released, it will often take a while to build it back up, so avoid using cheap little scares that reset that clock too often. Little moments of jump scare like suspense, breaking, and subversions of expectations can be used, but they should be used earlier in the story as a means of capturing the feel of being in a horror movie and avoided later in play when the big cinematic moments are fast approaching. Once tension is lost, it must be rebuilt, so avoid rapid-fire POW moments, as they will systematically lose all effect of scaring the players and will cheapen the moments you want to matter. It isn't easy, but with practice and player buy-in, this system can culminate into a beautifully horrifying experience for all. As a player in this system, the key to aiding in this shared story being successful is doing your part to drive the narrative. This often means playing your character like a character from a horror movie, instead of like an actual calculating person interested in their own survival. While this will depend on the character and horror genre being used, it's always better to think, how can I help drive the story on, instead of, how can I survive this situation and win this game of Dread? In truth, the only way everyone wins a game of Dread is if a wonderful story is told, and this can only be done with the help of characters driving the narrative on. Speaking of players, I know the game masters are evil monsters who seek only death and vengeance, so let's have some of our players tell you what they think of Dread.
So as a player of the Dread system, some interesting things about it. The dynamics between the game master and the players is very interesting because the game master has to be ready to kill a player at any moment for any reason that they would need to pull a Jenga piece out. And the player has to be ready to die at any moment. And it keeps things very tense and interesting because you want to look under the bed? Well, that's a pull, and there could be a monster under there that murders you right then if you're bad at Jenga. As well as the questionnaire can be very interesting when it comes to world building and kind of building your character and answering very loaded questions sometimes about like, what happened to the family dog? Or how did you murder your sister? You know, it can be interesting things that the game master comes up with to kind of frame your character, and then you have to fill in the blanks about, I guess quite literally fill in the blanks about your character, and play off of that, and just be very dynamic about your decisions. The same thing with the game master as well, is you have to be very dynamic with how your players decide to answer your questions and fill in those blanks, and you have to be very responsive about that. Also excellent at building tension. Nothing like the inevitability of death to cause tension. So
this game was super fun. I really am not a person who has done anything like this before, and it was really easy to play. It's a really good beginner's game. I really enjoyed making up my own character, and it was really cool in that it felt like you were in a movie, like you were a character in a scary movie, and the Jenga tower just feeling like it was going to fall over and you were going to die at any moment added a lot to the suspense.
I think by far the most interesting thing about the Dread system is the way the characters are created. Since it's sort of rules light, there's not, in fact it's sort of rules non-existent, there's not really like a lot to go into there, but that makes it a super approachable game and kind of an excellent party game too, even for people who don't really know RPGs or don't play stuff like Pathfinder or D&D. But the character creation is just really, really cool, and we've actually tried to use it in the D&D campaign, the way you make your character based off of a questionnaire, and some of them are really general, you know, or then just sort of establish, like, you know, you're the ship's engineer, how did you become that? Or you're a literature major in college, and like what made you like decide on that and stuff. And some of them are in other campaigns really oddly specific, like your game master makes you the family dog, which I can see him grinning behind the camera. He's still awful smug about that. And some of them are very probing questions, and they just help to establish stuff about your backstory and your relationship to other characters and to the world. I think in the very first one we did, I just got blindsided by like the second or third question, which was just like, how did your sister die? And then I was just in that moment having to decide, like, it's like okay, well, apparently my character had a sister, and whether or not those end up being important to like the story, they just help to establish like your relationship to the world and to the other party members and stuff like that. It's just really, really cool how well it works for how simple they are. And obviously the Jenga tower is just really good at building tension. Jenga's sort of a naturally tense game anyway, especially when it goes on for way too long. So it just works very well as the sort of driving mechanic, in building the tension of the game.
So that has been the Dread Tabletop RPG system. It really is an awesome system that makes you feel like you're in a horror movie. If you want to try your own hand at writing one of these out and making your own questionnaires, we have a video coming up on the channel soon that'll help you do just that. We also have a live game that we're going to be recording and putting up on the channel in honor of the Halloween season. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below. Please comment anything that you enjoyed about it or anything else you'd like to talk about, anything having to do with the Dread system or otherwise. Now, go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities. See you next time. So that's the...
That had more life to it than the first one. It didn't get very
It just
far.
died sooner. Live fast, die young. That's every sentence I've ever tried.